we have to think about how we can get the attention of the big folks. And in my opinion, you can really think back to your purchasing behavior and telling them, look, I used to be somebody who bought a ton of Ziploc bags, and you know this because they all have fascinating amounts of data on us, whether or not we like that or not, they do. So you know that I used to buy a ton of Ziploc bags. All of a sudden I haven't bought any in 5 years, like what happened? And then they start to dig into it.
One of the things, that could be really interesting is just rewinding the tape to what was the biggest pivotal change in our history that led to this? And it really was the 50s.
Absolutely.
And the 1950s changed a lot of things for people. And the society that we really love, click and things get shipped to you from all over the world, these cheap products, it's pretty dang cool. It's pretty amazing. But there's a downside to this. And I think now we can see it out the window. If you look last week, we had the 3 hottest days in the history of our globe ever.
Yep.
And you could say, oh, well, some people, these trends are occurring. This is beyond a trend. This is something that is a result of a series of things that I think humans have done to impact this sphere that we're floating around on. And, in the 50s, what happened for the first time is we got out of the cities and we moved into suburbs. And we bought bigger houses, and we had more kids, and we had more space. We filled those houses with things. Then we bought cars, right? And then credit came around. So that thing that you wanted, you didn't have to wait anymore. You just use your credit card. And then I think by the 60s, we finally had mass plastics, right? We could really store things longer too.
Convenience,
then,
right? That's where I feel like that got really, that convenience factor is what really pushed people forward, right? It was like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to deal with this. I'm just going to throw it away. And obviously plastics really kickstarted that. But I think about that a lot too today, where even the best of us, where we, the best of us, the ones that are trying the most, maybe, I don't think any of us could say that we're the best, but maybe the ones that are kept up awake at night by a lot of this, a lot of times I don't have time or the convenience factor to bring my refillable silicone squeeze pouches with my toddler's food in them, right? Sometimes I have to use the ones that I throw away. And so I think convenience is oftentimes the kind of dark, shadowy figure when we think about why we've gotten so addicted to plastics and this throwaway culture, right? But then credit, you're totally right, that the whole timeline is fascinating.
Yeah, it's the layering effect, right? It wasn't even one thing. Yeah. It was all of these things. And then you had globalization, and then you have the amazing Amazons of the world, right? It's easier to get an item delivered to you from China than it is down the street now. That's
Absolutely.
Just where we are. And we will ship I think it's over 150 billion packages a year now around the world. Yeah. And it's not so much the transportation byproduct. In fact, that's a subset of the CO2 impact. But the packaging is probably one of the number one contributors to waste in that process. Yeah. And so, like I said, there's a lot of good things that came out of this, but I think it's time, and hopefully people are more educated now to just kind of wake up and say, oh, can we rethink some of these systems that we've had around for decades?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more that we, again, take the lens of the consumer, when we think about trying to solve these massive problems such as climate change, the more people can feel empowered. It can feel we talk a lot about climate anxiety over at Brightly because so many of us get started by thinking, oh my gosh, the world is on fire. I need to just get up and take action. And then once we realize that, okay, maybe me, myself, I'm not going to be able to have the biggest impact ever, immediately, we start to have anxiety about it. And we start to realize, what am I going to do with myself? And so you're right. When we take a step back and think about things from a daily habit change perspective, I think it can be so impactful. And, making sure that we're not losing sight of what we can control. That's why we talk a lot about that as well. When we think about governments and corporations and things of that nature, obviously those folks can have the biggest, most outsized impact. We all agree on that. Whether or not they listen to us as consumers is another thing. And when we think about, influencing public policy or, voting and all those types of things, of course, being a good, citizen and doing your civic duty is very important to helping solve, the problem of global warming, et cetera. But when we think about corporations, we can't all just go chain ourselves to, the Chase Banks of the world because we don't like their investment into fossil fuels. We have to think about how we can get the attention of the big folks. And in my opinion, you can really think back to your purchasing behavior and telling them, look, I used to be somebody who bought a ton of Ziploc bags. And you know this because they all have fascinating amounts of data on us, whether or not we like that or not, they do. So you know that I used to buy a ton of Ziploc bags. All of a sudden, I haven't bought any in 5 years. Like, what happened? And then they start to dig into it. And actually, a lot of people don't know SC Johnson and Company, one of the biggest, consumer good conglomerates out there. They bought Stasher Bag a few years back, which most folks don't know. And when they do find that out, sometimes people get angry about it because they see that large corporation as, a bad actor. But I choose to look at it a slightly different way, thinking about like, well, maybe they were identifying a trend that they wanted to, obviously profit from, but they also wanted to start to just put their ear to the ground a little bit more and listen. And actually, they literally just released their own version of a Stasher bag by Ziploc that I saw at Target the other day, which is kind of cool. So, I mean, they're eating their own lunch, I suppose, their own prepackaged lunch in a Ziploc.
Yeah, one of the things I know you focus a lot, with Brightly is just kind of education. And I think when you think of climate, everything, it is a very complex topic. I mean, I'm spending a lot of my time on it, and it's just, you have 8 billion people on the planet.